Hi, good morning, everybody. My name's Mark Nicholas, and I'm a sales director at Bell Integration. I've spent the last 30 years finding disruptive solutions for our customers, and I can't think of anything more disruptive than AI. This session is all about MLOps, best practice for operational excellence. There's a few kind of key takeaways that I'm hoping we can get out of this session. Starting out with MLOps from ground zero and the implications of not doing it. How generative AI will change MLOps practices. Doing MLOps in the cloud versus on-prem. What's next for MLOps, which is a pretty big topic. We might be able to cover a little bit of that. And also addressing the AI skills gap within MLOps. I've got an expert panel to help me answer those questions in front of you here. I'll get them to introduce themselves in just a minute. We've got Ben Gutkovich from Superlinked, the co-founder from Superlinked. Kamal Jain, Principal Data Engineering Manager from BT. John Foley, Lead Data Scientist from PokerStars. And Adnan Fiaz, Principal Data Scientist from National Gas. And perhaps if Adnan, if you'd like to start just introducing yourself and give us an insight as to how you might be able to contribute to the MLOps discussion.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Adnan Fiaz. I've been working in data science for a really long time. I started off in the aviation sector, moved my way to consultancy and e-commerce, and now working as a principal data scientist at National Gas. And as a data scientist, we've traditionally not been worried about as much about what comes after our modeling approach, but more and more it's becoming really important, and I've seen firsthand that it's not something that you can ignore anymore.
Great, thanks Adnan. And John?
Yeah, so John Foley, lead data scientist at PokerStars, based here in London. So first of all, shout out to Informa Tech for organising a conference a 10-minute walk from my house. That was really helpful. Yeah, at PokerStars, we are the world's favorite online poker destination. We are part of a wider group of brands called Flutter, and Flutter is the parent company of a lot of betting and gaming brands that you probably would have heard of. In this country, you have Betfair, Paddy Power, Sky Bet, and a number of other brands across the world. So I'm in the data science team at PokerStars, and we kind of solve machine learning problems across the business, all our different verticals, poker, casino, sports, as well as all the typical types of problems you'll see in e-commerce businesses like fraud and security and all those sorts of things. So our data science team is part of a wider data and analytics tribe. And our data platform is actually going under quite a large-scale migration at the moment from on-premise to the cloud. So that's kind of what's piqued my interest in MLOps, and that's probably why I'm here today.
Great, thanks John. And Kamal?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Kamal Jain. I work for British Telecom as a Principal Data Engineering Manager. So my interest lies that how can we harness AI, machine learning, deep learning technologies, and the data engineering to provide a super and hyper-personalized experience to our customers. I was also being recognized as an exceptional talent by the government of UK, specifically into the AI and machine learning. Yeah, and here, would love to share my thoughts on the MLOps. Thank you.
Thanks. And Ben?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I guess it's working now. I'm Ben Gutkovich. I am the COO and co-founder of Superlinked. We are an early-stage, deep-tech, VC-backed startup building an MLOps platform called VectorOps, which is specific for working with large language models. And I'll talk about that later on. I am a software engineer by training. I spent the first half of my career building and launching products for millions of consumers, and had kind of first-hand experience of how hard it is to get those ML products into productions, how frustrating it is, and how the deadlines keep moving, and then you can't even, be certain what results you will get with the models. So I think, there is a lot of value in MLOps, and one of the reasons that we, with Daniel, who actually I'm covering for, the kind of genius ex-Google engineer who built our ML infrastructure, MLOps infrastructure, built it to help people who work with LLM actually get those models and those insights into productions, into their products at scale and in real time. So I'll be more representing, I guess, the voice of the customer or the business owner who is kind of suffering and is frustrated by those ML projects never getting to production.
Great, thank you. I'm sure a lot of people share the pain of that in here. Let's start off then. So it's easy to assume that everybody's already doing ML ops at scale and have already operationalized it. But the truth is everybody's got to start somewhere, and many of the companies that are using it at scale today had to start from ground zero at some point in time. So Adnan, I'd like to start off with you today. Your thoughts on the impact of not doing ML ops and the disadvantage that potentially that might position somebody in.
Yeah, so if you think of MLOps, think of it's not very different from, well, it is actually very different, but it's based off of what is already there. So what's already there is the running software, so software operations or DevOps. And not having MLOps, you'll have the same kind of risks as not having DevOps. So you'll have users that don't come back anymore because they're getting the wrong results, or they're getting something that they didn't expect them to get, or your system's failing or it's not running at all. These kind of things risks are already well known. And the difference is that how do you mitigate them? So if your users are not using your application anymore, your ML application anymore, you will find that out because you'll have your usage metrics and everything. But the problem is then, like, why are they not using anymore? And to figure that out, you need some metrics or some sort of monitoring on top of that. So to come back to my what I said first, the things that will affect not having MLOps is not having users, basically. Your users running away, your system failing, you're not knowing how to fix it, what to fix, and when to fix it as well. So there are a few things that you can do, obviously, to implement MLOps. And if you start at ground zero, then it's to start at the foundation. And I would like to compare it to like a mountain. So if you look at a mountain, then the first sort of like half of to climb a mountain, the first half is easy. It's not that steep. It just gets steep at the end. But if you do the not so steep part, you're already halfway there. So if you get that right, you're already halfway there. So the foundation is to version everything. Version your code, version your data, version your models. So version everything, and you can easily find out if there is a problem. Not so much find out what the problem, but if there is a problem, you can go back a version. So that's one of the foundations. The next foundation is foundational thing is have monitoring in place. So the difference between MLOps and DevOps is that you have different kinds of monitoring. That's basically the only difference. And with a normal software product, you will have like usage metrics, just throw errors and stuff like that. With ML applications, it's a little bit more difficult because you need to figure out like how is it performing, and if it is giving the wrong results, or is it failing because there's a data problem. So the metrics, I won't go into too much detail, but the metrics are a little bit different, but you need to have them in place as well. And then on top of that is, how are you going to fix it? So you'll need to figure out what is causing the problem. Could it be, is it the problem with the machine model, with the model itself? Is the problem with the data? Can you fix upstream data? Can you even change anything there? Or is the problem with the infrastructure that you're using, the algorithms that you're using? So these kind of things will help you, if you have the monitoring in place, it will help you fix that as well. I think that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Thanks, Adnan. There's obviously lots of attractions of moving to the cloud, in particular around things like scalability, for example. John, I'd love to know a little bit more about the journey that you've embarked on, migrating to the cloud, and some of the benefits that you either already have reaped or are expecting to reap as a result of moving off-prem into the cloud from an MLOps point of view.
Yeah, so so as I mentioned, our data platform is undergoing this huge migration from on-premise to the cloud, and this also means that it's a complete rebuild of our machine learning stack. So this has not been straightforward, and if anyone has ever had to go through something like this, you'll know that it's very complicated. It can be slow and painful. I think the biggest eye-opener for me has actually not been about managing the technology and the cloud services and all of those things. It's actually been about managing the people and the different teams and the sort of communication between teams from different backgrounds. If you're like me, like I'm a data scientist, so I can kind of be in this bubble of machine learning and Jupyter notebooks and playing around with data and playing around with the coolest new algorithms and stuff like that. And it's easy to forget that, especially when you work somewhere like PokerStars, the company's a lot bigger than that, and there's a lot more going on. So, we would be sort of putting together like a wish list or like a list of things we want for a new machine learning platform. And it's interesting to me that just because something is trendy in the machine learning world or it's becoming popular in MLOps doesn't necessarily mean that it fits in with the goals of the wider organization. So it might be feature stores or model registries or scalable training environments or anything like that. If we go to, we're working with like a team of very talented and very experienced cloud architects on this. So we might go to them and say, for our new machine learning platform, we need a feature store. That's really important. And they might come back and say, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to give you like a database of customer level aggregated features. That should do everything you need. And then we have to go back and say, well, hang on, a feature store and a database, they're not the same, and it becomes this kind of back and forth. And like I said, these architects that we're working with, they can be very experienced, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've worked to build stuff for a data science team or for a machine learning purpose. So, I mean, feature stores is just one example, but it could be anything. It could be experiment logging, or like I said, model registries, or any of these things that to a data scientist or to someone working in the MLOps world, that's sort of like second nature. It's obvious that you need that. But that's not necessarily obvious to everyone else when you're working in such a big company. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me. And it's like before you have to delve into the technological choices, you have to spend a lot of time getting the people right and getting the team structure right and sort of figuring out that part first. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you. Thanks, John. So, Ben, I want to talk a little bit about generative AI, and a core building block for that today is vector enabling embeddings. And today we can use LLMs to turn any kind of data into vectors. And I know this is specifically something that you're doing in Superlinked. So it'd be interesting if you could talk a little bit about how applying the MLOps principles is helping Superlinked take advantage of LLMs today.
Sure. And, I'm sure there are a lot of people in the audience who are experimenting with LLMs. And what we hear from practitioners is that it's quite easy to build something cool with LLMs. I mean, we see hundreds of startups being funded, right? But it's actually quite hard to work with LLMs in production, at scale, and in real time. Right, and some of the challenges that LLMs bring challenges and opportunities, right, bring to the MLOps space. One is that you no longer train the model. You don't have control. You no longer can train the model just because the training process is so expensive that only a few companies can actually afford it. So it's all about fine-tuning the parameters of the model and integrating that with your product. The other part of it, and again, very important, is what's called prompt engineering. what are the inputs actually going into those models so you can produce outputs that make sense for your use case. And finally, the vector databases, right? How do you actually evaluate the results, right? In a regular MLOps platform or machine learning model, you have a certain parameter that you optimize for, and you can measure how well your model performs on that parameter. With LLM, your output is more text, right? Or more vectors. How do you actually know whether it's a good output or not a good output? And that's what requires organizations to actually A/B test those models in production to make sure that they actually deliver the value that they hope for, right? And this is the reason we built Superlinked, right? We call it a vector ops platform because it abstracts all the complexity of working with vectors, with actually dealing with vector databases and understanding what's a good input, what's not a good input. So that's always abstracted away, and you have a configuration interface through which you can define which models to use. You can use open source available models, OpenAI, closed source models as well. You can use your own proprietary model if you have the capacity to build them and to train them. And then define the parameters, how they are combined to produce the actual output in production, and providing very simple REST APIs to actually bring those outputs into your application in real time and at scale. Right? So we think that LLMs, they create a kind of a sub-section or sub, a part of MLOps, but it's a different type of MLOps, right?
Thank you. Moving on to Kamal. So in your work, I imagine you spend quite a bit of time refactoring Python in order to make it both scalable, but also get around the latency problem and make it much more quicker performant. As we look at forthcoming changes in the ML marketplace, and in particular, looking at things like Mojo programming language, which purports to be 35,000 times quicker than Python, are you looking forward to some of these new developments and that language in particular to help you?
Sure. So Mojo is a great application. It is definitely much faster than Python. It's able to take all the syntax of Python. So if you see see Mojo has all the features of Python plus the features of C++ as well as the Rust programming, which makes the programming, this language very fast. So, if you see in terms of the processing, Mojo is able to process, on parallel nodes, which, makes the programming, or the processing much faster. But on the other side, if you see, there are zero-cost models available into the market, where they work on NAS, which is neural architecture search. You have a data and you have different models available into the market. So what this NAS or neural architecture search does is it sees that based on your data, what architecture, what model best suits, right? So my take on to using Mojo as a language. Mojo is still very new. It doesn't have a strong user community, while Python has built so much of libraries, so much of user community, which has been contributing every second to it. So apart from being faster, Mojo has to do something which is something differentiator and able to inculcate everything from Python and able to fetch the interest of the user community as well, so that this can be widely accepted by everyone into the AI community.
Thank you. I want to open something out to the audience now. So as we look at automation as a means of not just speeding up the development process, but also potentially opening up AI to people that don't necessarily have the coding experience that some of the people on the panel here have. And in particular, AutoML. So one of the questions that I've got for all of you here is, could we have a show of hands for anybody that's tried to use AutoML to build in the past? Have any of you used AutoML so far? There's a few hands. Yeah. only a spattering of people. Who's still using it? So presumably you've tried it, but are you still using it today? No, that's quite interesting. So you are still using it, okay. I'm interested on the panel's view of Auto ML as to whether you think that's actually a tool that's got a longevity to help with MLOps with regards to producing code, but more importantly, the democratization of AI.
Yeah, I can jump in. So I think I'm a little bit maybe more skeptical than other people about AutoML, although judging by the number of hands, maybe it's the same level of skepticism.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think there was only 3 or 4.
Yeah. The thing about AutoML is like, so I guess 2 concerns that I would have would be, first of all, with generative AI and LLMs, I think the regulation that's coming around the corner, it's only getting stricter. Things are going to get a lot tighter. And when things go wrong, regulators like to have someone to talk to. They want to know, they want to talk to the person who built this. And I think if you're a company whose strategy is to just use AutoML and you're relying less on the domain experts who really understand the sort of inner workings of these models that you're building, that's not going to play out very well for regulators. Now, at the moment, that's not a big deal, but like I said, with all the new technology coming out, there's such a focus on AI safety and all of that stuff. Regulation could get and will get a lot tighter, and I don't think that's a good thing if you're an AutoML enthusiast. The other thing I will say is, like, in my experience, the most valuable data scientists and machine learning practitioners are the ones who are the most creative, and they can sort of think in an abstract way and come up with novel solutions that maybe have never even, novel solutions that are very specific to the business problem that have never actually been done before, if that makes sense. And with AutoML, you sort of lose that, I think. So I guess I'm skeptical that AutoML will be able to keep up with this. I mean, say for example, the companies next door, the stuff they're trying to sell you, these products are so complicated, and they're a lot more complicated than the products that people were trying to sell you 20 years ago, right? And the products that people are going to try to sell you in 20 years from now are going to be even more complicated. And how is AutoML going to keep up with this? It's going to be a lot easier for people who deeply understand the business and understand the products to build like machine learning solutions related to this. So that's just like I guess 2 reasons why I'm a little bit skeptical about the future of AutoML.
Yeah, if I could add, I'm skeptical too, but maybe not as skeptical. I think there's a space for use of AutoML. So there's definitely uses out there that don't require you to have in-depth knowledge of the problem to actually have it solved. There are uses out there that you just give it data and it gives you a solution without telling you what the model is. And I think for those kind of cases, and this is probably a minority, but for those kind of cases, what they would benefit from, or where the direction that they would move in, is probably to add the MLOps bit to it. So they would. So if you think about wanting to know why things go wrong and stuff like that, for those kind of solutions, and for example, computer vision, having an explainability module on top of it or something else, adding that to their product is relatively easy to do in like a couple of years maybe. So I think definitely they will benefit from that. But if you're talking about being deep inside a company where you need domain knowledge and everything to solve the problem, yes, AutoML there is probably not the best solution. I've used AutoML in the past, and it's great for inspiration, much like an LLM is great for inspiration to write something. AutoML similarly is great to have that first pass of like, okay, so this is kind of my baseline, and this is what I'm trying to beat or something like that. But nothing beyond that really.
Thanks, Adnan. Anything to add?
I would have a slightly different opinion to that. So while in the AutoML, you don't need, you'll not be able to create the bespoke models because that requires you to have, strong programming skills. However, to my, in my opinion, AutoML can definitely, it's a great tool in democratizing AI because with the simple business knowledge, right, and very small AI skills, you'll still be able to perform the feature engineering, you'll be able to train the models, you'll be able to, test the model and see, how the model is performing. So, it helps in connecting more and more, users who has more in terms of the domain knowledge, more on the the business knowledge, rather than the technical, Python knowledge or, any of the programming knowledge, right? So this really helps, all those user community to leverage the natural language processing, computer vision, and all the power of machine learning, deep learning, and get the required results much, much faster. So it's definitely a great tool in democratizing AI.
Thanks, Mel.
Well, I'll be quick to maybe sum up. I agree that not in every case, for sure, but there are 10x more developers at least than data scientists or machine learning engineers, and a lot of companies just cannot attract very good data scientists and machine learning engineers, especially given that the big tech are kind of hoarding them for themselves, even if they don't really give them work. I mean, there's a bunch of stories now about Google and Meta hiring engineers who are just sitting around getting paid without actually getting work. And if more engineers in some use cases can build those models and smarter products, right, for all of us, more personalized products, I think all of us will benefit, right? And AutoML is one way of doing that.
Oh, you need to tell me where I need to apply for that job.
Sorry?
You need to tell me where I need to apply for that job.
We'll exchange details.
Next question is a bit more generic, really. I'd like the panel's opinion on advice and guidance that you would like to give to the audience with respect to building MLOps practices. Who'd like to start with that one? Kamal?
Sure. So, if someone has to, start with the MLOps, I think something which is very important is the quality of data, because the basic essence of MLOps is how fast you can deliver accurate models, so that there is no data drift or there is no the model degradation happens. But something which is critical is the quality of data. So or the DQ process has to be very, very strong. Second part, the governance, because when you are building the overall ML pipeline, and you need to ensure that the final results is being visible or accessible only by the authorized people. Not everyone is able to access it. So in that essence, the governance of the MLOps platform is very, very important. The third part is we need to continuously look for monitoring and see while we are having the model into the production, but while we are experimenting with the new or the different models, how can we see that those models are performing better than the production models? Only if it's performing better, then perform the A/B testing, and then upgrade this experimental model into the production. Yeah, I think these things are something quite important.
Ben, have you got anything to add?
Sure. I mean, I read that 80 to 90% of the models never make it to production,
Yeah.
right?
Is that still the case? I think it was last time I checked, it was 83% or something, which is terrible.
I
Really.
don't know. I'd love to hear from practitioners, right? I'm
Yeah.
not a practitioner. I see it from the business side, and it scares me, right? There's a huge waste, right,
Yeah.
of all those hours and months and years of work that just goes down the drain, right? And I think MLOps goal is to help get those models into production and deliver the business result that they should, right? So, yeah, and there's definitely not enough practitioners in that space yet. So I think that's a field that will be super valuable. There's a huge opportunity,
Yeah.
both in platforms and people, right, who know how to do it.
That raises a really good point, actually, that you raised earlier, which is, do you think we've got a good enough handle on the KPIs to measure the value that those models provide to the business at the point you produce them? Because it's not just a case of there's a large percentage that don't actually make it into successful production.
Yeah.
But even the ones that do we think we've got a handle on the value that they actually provide to the business at the moment?
I mean, I think it really depends on what's the goal of the model, right? If the goal of the model is some kind of predictive maintenance, then it's relatively easy to measure, right? You say, well, can I measure with a high enough reliability when my next maintenance window should be, and obviously saving cost, etc., right? We recently integrated with a social media or social network in the US, and they use Superlinked to build their personalized feed. So a kind of feed you would see on TikTok or LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. Spend a couple of days of integrating with the APIs. We spent supporting them about 3-4 weeks later to tweak the parameters and A/B test a bunch of different models and combinations of those vectorizers. But they got 55% increase in engagement with the feed, right? So that was the KPI they put forward in the beginning of that POC to say this is what we want to achieve. And eventually we split traffic through our platform and then achieved that and moved all the traffic to the new model, right? And ideally, right, on our roadmap is making this selection and A/B testing more automated, and maybe even, and there is a great podcast with the Spotify head of personalization about actually giving a personalized model for each person. Well, let's say for each segment of person, which is automatically selected for that person, because some people might like fresher songs, some people might like more diversity, some people want to stay within their kind of narrow taste, right? So you can. There is a lot of opportunities in the space, I think.
Great.
If I could add, to tie into that, so it's to me it comes down to managing expectations. So part of the reason why the models or the applications don't make it is because the user has different expectations of his result and is disappointed. And similarly, when implementing MLOps, it's also all about managing expectations. So the level of don't make it too complex, like basically. If your users if you have users that are like maybe occasionally use your application, then it's no point of putting like all of the bells and whistles of MLOps on top of your model for no reasons. Like so. Make sure you know what the expectations are, manage them, and adjust your solution to that.
Sounds like good advice. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so just want to see if there's any questions from the audience before we finish up. Somebody over there? Can we borrow a microphone? Thanks. Thank you.
Saves me from projecting. I was curious about your opinions around sort of proprietary ML frameworks or toolkits like SageMaker and using that versus sort of DIY open source frameworks.
Proprietary toolsets. Anybody got an answer for that one?
Are you asking for specific examples or?
No, I guess just opinions.
Opinions on the usage of them. Yeah.
What you want to avoid is being locked in, basically. So you need to find. So our job as data scientists and I guess managers is not to do the whole operations bit. So it's not our, let's say, unique selling point. So we want to outsource that as much as possible. So really use whatever tool you can get your hands on. And if it's for free, then that's a plus. That's my opinion, really.
Yeah, I would say, like, whisper it quietly, but there's always an open source alternative, right? And that advice is not applicable to every company. I mean, if you're working in like a highly regulated industry or something, maybe open source isn't an option for you. But proprietary tools. It's important to contextualize what are you, right? What type of business are you? Just because someone's giving you advice that this is something that you could be using or should be using, a lot of the advice you hear out there is actually not being aimed at small businesses or even medium sized. It's being aimed at like big corporations who can afford a SageMaker or a Vertex. So I guess that would be one bit of advice is like try and figure out what's right for you, and not necessarily don't listen to don't just take on board everything you hear, because it might not be aimed at your company basically.
One more question.
I've got one more question. That's all right. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah, got a question around MLOps, Gen AI, LLMs. So maybe the first part will be addressed to Ben. How many companies in the industry, or in general, do you think they're ready to put LLMs in prod and do MLOps themselves? And then the second part will be maybe to the panel. Do you think your company is ready to have LLMs and ops and have the right foundation to do MLOps readily mature?
Well, I mean, to the number of companies that use LLM in productions, it's hard to say, but I would say all the big techs have some sort of solution that uses vector embeddings, right, and leverages. Sorry? Well, from the people we talk to, a lot are experimenting, right? This kind of quote that we hear a lot. A lot are experimenting with that, trying to integrate it in different parts of the system. A lot in customer service, definitely. Kind of chatbots, of course, and all kinds of kind of conversational AI type of solutions. But they are struggling to bring it into real-time customer-facing applications, right? So how do you actually now take the outputs and put it in a form that is useful for the customer in real time, except again this kind of more conversational AI customer service types of queries, yeah. So that's what we see in the market so far.
In fact, just to add, so LLMs are good, but it's something which has come recently, with the advent of ChatGPT, then Bard, and if you see, most of the companies are using the cautious approach, while these provide very powerful techniques to provide the conversational AI technologies, but the companies are also skeptical that any data which is being fed into these models gets public. So a lot of cautions are being taken by the companies so that their private and the confidential information is not leaked out. Right. And coming in terms of the MLOps, I think along with this LLM, so this is something as I was just saying. So these things have started coming in place, but with the caution the companies has been taking it. Yeah.
Sorry. So can we just give a big round of applause to our panelists? Thank you very much.